Paul Virilio was born in France in 1932. He grew up in the northern coastal region. After a normal childhood, he was soon made very impressionable by World War II. He has been quoted saying that war was his university. After training at art school, Virilio specialized in stained glass artwork, and he worked alongside the famous Henri Matisse. After being enlisted in the army during the Algerian War of Independence, Virilio studied phenomenology, which is the philosophical study of the structures of experience and consciousness at the University of Paris. Virilio developed what he calls the war model of the modern city, and of all of human society. He also coined the term dromology, meaning the logic of speed that is the foundation of technological society. He has written over 10 books on his ideas of dromology and the war models of human nature. Most of his essays discuss space and time and its relation to the postmodern city. His most famous work is Speed and Politics, published in France in 1977. It is the capstone of his work, building on the works of his contemporaries like McLuhan. Virilio presents this radically political vision that speed is the engine of destruction. Just 3 years after Speed and Politics was published, Virilio published his 1980 work, The Aesthetics of Dissapearance. He has referred to this work as a juncture in his thinking. He brought his focus onto the logistics of perception. Speed and Politics established Virilio as a dromology theorist. In The Aesthetics of Dissapearance, he introduced pycnolepsy. Virilio begins the passage we read with a definition of pycnolepsy, which is the epileptic state of consciousness. He explains pycnolepsy as a cup falling off of the table. Its beginning and end are sudden, but there is an absence that lasts a few seconds in between. Generally, this loss goes by unnoticed, stitched back together by the return of suddenness, forming a continuous time. Virilio continues to explain how children are the most frequent victims of this pycnolepsy. Children are persuaded of the existence of events that have not yet happened in their presence, and this forces the child to constantly stretch the limits of memory, allowing for the attempt to find information that they have never known. He explains this using a bouquet of flowers placed under the young pycnoleptic's eye. It is viewed as not only the bouquet, but also as the person who placed it in the vase and the field from which it was gathered. This tendency to fill in sequences and recreate things unseen is the focus of the pycnoleptic. Virilio makes a subtle nod to Marshall McLuhan later in his essay when talking about photographer Jacques-Henri Lartigue. Lartigue explains that along with a loss of power over himself, it obliged him to have a recourse to technical prosthesis. This form of auto-amputation pushes Virilio's point, showing the use of technology as an accommodation of the effects of aging. Virilio argues that if we move towards the use of prosthesis, we also move towards the elimination of time. After a short break into these thoughts on auto-amputation, Virilio brings us back to pycnolepsy by discussing the separation of the seen and the unseen. Virilio says pycnolepsy is the complement in the waking order of paradoxical sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep. Pycnolepsy instead is the idea of rapid waking, which Virilio states is just as inconceivable as life without dreams. Virilio's discussion of this paradoxical waking continues through the discussion of film. The discussion of film begins with an introduction to one of film's greatest minds, Georges Méliès. Méliès liked to joke that the trick, intelligently applied, today allows us to make the visible, the supernatural, the imaginary, even the impossible. By using these tricks, Méliès was able to transform the art of film. By chance, one day while filming, Méliès invented the stop trick, a trick by substitution. By creating the desynchronization of film, Méliès was able to recreate the ideas of pycnolepsy. This led the way for chronophotography. Chronophotography allows for the unseen visible through the techniques of its creation. Chronophotography is related to Virilio's ideas of pycnolepsy because it proves the existence of the middle states that are often forgot about, like the ideas of the fallen cup, with the middle of its fall almost forgotten. Etienne Jules Marie used chronophotography to study what he believed to be fairly uncontrollable phenomena, the flight of free-flying birds, insects, and the dynamics of fluids. By showing these in-between states, he allowed for forms to become visible. A certain sense of aletheia can be found in images such as these. The forms of these images become visible through these in-between states, and through these images we are able to perceive malleable forms, which is also a pursuit of time. To bring it back to Marie, Marie believes that light is the way in which we observe time. All movement is only observed by the change in the trickery of the movement of light. Virilio goes on to describe Marie's ideas of the effect of the real. He believes that the real becomes that of the readiness of luminous emission. What is given to see is due to the phenomena of acceleration and deceleration in every respect identifiable with intensities of light. These ideas fit directly in with what I mentioned earlier about Virilio's nod to Heidegger and Aletheia. Virilio continues on to discuss the life of Howard Hughes. Hughes was a billionaire business tycoon and one of the world's greatest aviators. Hughes realized that his desire for movement is only a desire of inertia, to see arrive what was left behind. Virilio then exposes that, like his cockpit, Hughes wanted to be in a like room even though they were worlds apart. So even as he traveled around the world, each place was just the same as the last, from his static room in the clouds. In his later years, Hughes escaped all uncertainty by believing he could be everywhere and nowhere, yesterday and tomorrow. He existed in his bed with an artificial window to the outside world. This directly relates to the Socratic myth of the cave, allowing for the patrons, in this case Hughes, to contemplate the real. Virilio's final points include the view of the two kinds of lack based on Hebraic tradition: Shemama, despair and destruction, and Midbar, uncertainty and effort. He connects these to the stories of Hughes and Christ. Through Virilio's ideas presented here, we can see that as we patch time together, the real is almost always revealed to us. Our lives are essentially defined by the pycnoleptic sequences that are so common. These sequences are the reason we laugh at jokes and are astounded by magic. Virilio gives us a deeper understanding at how these events are played out to us through life.